Hey everybody. Before I get started with tonight's video, I just want to say special thanks to all the writers so far who have let me narrate their works, and I would particularly like to thank you, the viewers, those who have watched, liked, subbed to my videos, my channel. This really means a lot to me, and to show my appreciation, I couldn't do this without any of you. And I would really just like to express my gratitude. Um, this has been a blessing so far. I'm really passionate about this, and I'm really looking forward to the future of this channel. But anyway, enough of the soppy stuff. Let's get to the real reason why you're here. So tonight's video, we're going to be doing a different format. I'm not going to be narrating any story from Reddit or from Nightscribe, anything online. This is 100% a real story from my past, my childhood. I have here in my phone, a few notes to kind of keep myself on track, but really I'm not going to be reading from anything. This is just going to be a story like you would hear at a campfire or at a gathering of some sort where you're trying to scare the piss out of your friends. I grew up around the Central Coast, Salinas Valley particularly, in California. When I was about 8 or 9, my parents had signed me up for the local Cub Scout troop. Luckily, a lot of my friends from school were also in this troop, so, I didn't really have to look for new friends there. It wasn't really that awkward. And we'd meet up, once a week, just to go over stuff with, our badges, learning skills like camping, rope tying, all the usual stuff that Cub Scouts do. We'd go camping every now and then on some weekend excursion, but every year in particular, we all looked forward to going to summer camp for a week. And every year in particular, we'd go to this one along the coast of Big Sur, south of Carmel, Monterey, in the Redwood Forest, along the Ventana Wilderness. And if anyone doesn't know, the Ventana Wilderness is this massive span of mountains and forests along the Central Coast. It's got hundreds of miles of just foliage, and there's nothing really out there. In terms of civilization, that is. It's gorgeous. But to get back to the story, every summer, almost every summer that is, we would go out to this big Boy Scout camp in Big Sur, and it's a big one. I don't think I should give away the name, but it's a very well-known summer camp in California. And me and my friends in my troop would look forward almost every summer going to this place. There was a few summers we went to different summer camps, along the Sierra Mountains, but for the most part, this was our go-to place. We absolutely loved it out there. I remember I had just finished my sophomore year of high school, back in 2013, back in the ancient days of the 2010s, and our troop had decided to go to this Boy Scout camp yet again. But this time it was different. We were all getting older. The magic of summer camp, wasn't the same as it was as a kid. Once you hit your teenage years, that kind of goes away. And I remember that was officially my last year of summer camp as a Boy Scout. And a large part about, me was bummed out about this. It felt like the end of an era. I was getting older. And essentially, me and my friends, we wouldn't do this tradition anymore. But there was a silver lining, because I was going through my junior year, and in the spring, I had decided, you know what, I want a summer job, or at least want to make some cash on the side so I could spend it on things that I want to do, or on things that I want. And I was 16 years old. I was legal age to start working. And my scoutmaster, as well as my parents, threw out the idea, hey, you know what? You could apply to that summer camp that you went to as a kid all those summers. You could apply and work there. It would be like almost, attending summer camp, but you're getting paid for this. You get to lead hikes, you get to teach kids, about the local fauna and wildlife and area. It sounded like a really good gig to me at the time. It was almost like a vacation, but getting paid for it. That's the thought I had. So I applied, I went in for the interview, and before you know it, I got the job. I had the position. I was going to prepare, I was going to finish my school year, and around late June is when I would start. And looking back on it now as an adult, honestly, it was one of the best jobs I've ever had to this day. I mean, if I'm ever going through a bad day or something, or I'm feeling nostalgic, I look back on that summer. I was out there for about a month. I look back on that summer at that job and I say, damn, dude, I wish I was doing that, again right now. But like I said, the job would only last a month, late June to late July. And essentially what the job consisted of, you get there. I didn't drive, so my dad pretty much dropped me off in the middle of this empty parking lot in the forest at Big Sur. Luckily, I wasn't there really by myself very long because the rest of the staff showed up. Day one is pretty much just the orientation. You're getting to know everybody. You get assigned to your team and your function, what you'd be doing there for the summer, and you're preparing for the next 4 weeks. I got along with all my coworkers. My manager, who was the guy who was above me and who was pretty much teaching me how to do my job, his name was Steven. God bless that guy. That guy was awesome. I never contacted that guy again after that summer, but he was just a really good friend and treated me with a lot of respect. Anyway, so like I said, you'd be out there for a month. Week 1 was orientation, and you're pretty much preparing and getting to know the grounds and what your role would be for that week. And then the other 3 weeks, the kids, the other troops would arrive, and the regular camp activities would resume. The first few days when I was there, the people that were in charge of running the camp would tell all the staffers, particularly there was a lot of new staffers that year, myself included, that there would be a drill in the middle of the week, sometime Wednesday or Thursday night, a mock emergency where they would teach us procedures of what to do should a scout or parent or volunteer go missing. 2 of the veteran staffers, I think their names were Hunter and Tanner, they had volunteered to be the quote-unquote, missing scouts. And they were going to basically post up in one of the campsites and just kind of hide there, hang out there until, finally our groups, we got assigned into groups for this drill, that we would, split up and look in various campsites. Eventually we would, find them, and we'd all go back to the cafeteria and be judged. We'd have a criteria of what we did right, what we did wrong, what we can improve on, and just basically be given tips should this happen in real life. A scout goes missing. They told us this on the first day or 2, and me being a dumbass, I had heard this, and I had completely threw it out of my mind. I back then I was notoriously very forgetful, and I don't even know why I'm saying back then. I still am to this day, and you can ask my family, my friends. I am notoriously just like absent-minded sometimes. So Wednesday night comes, and we all lived on this place called Staff Hill. It was probably about like 400 or 500 yards up the hill from the cafeteria. And I say this because the alarm system was, there was an actual alarm system that would blare in preparation for this event that was in the cafeteria. And I had already forgotten that this event was already going to happen. But somehow, I shit you not, I had slept through this like loud beeping alarm system. By that time, it had already felt like a long week, and I must have been pretty tired because normally I'm a very, very light sleeper. At the slightest movement, or if someone enters the room, I hear a sound. Sometimes my roommate's a little noisy in the morning. I could hear it, and I need to put on headphones or something. Somehow, I had slept through this loud blaring alarm system, and I don't know if "slept through" is necessarily the appropriate wording because I remember kind of feeling like I was lucid dreaming. I remember hearing a loud noise and being very confused, and hearing a lot of the staffers, yelling at one another, saying, that's the drill. We got to go down to the cafeteria. But when this bustling, was happening, I honestly thought I was dreaming, and I stayed in bed. I stayed in my sleeping bag in my tent, and I slept. I didn't sleep for very long. It was probably only another 10 or 15 minutes before I was awoken by two other staffers coming up to get me because they realized I hadn't made it to the cafeteria. So one, I was already groggy, disoriented. I literally didn't bring anything. We were supposed to be prepared for this. We were supposed to have flashlights, backpacks, our jackets on. I got out of bed with the clothes I had on my back. I put on my hiking shoes, and I was just so fucked. That was all that I had on me. And they told me, they asked me, why didn't you get up? We were hoping to see you at the cafeteria. Everyone's already there. We don't have time. Just, come down. We gotta get going because we gotta get into our teams, and we gotta go out and look for the quote unquote missing staffers. So we run down very briskly into the cafeteria. I get in there. Everyone's making fun of me. Oh, princess overslept. That type of stuff. We get into our teams, and we get assigned the specific campsites, the locations that we're supposed to hike out to, and basically look around for these two missing staffers. In this camp, there are 12 individual campsites that the troops would be staying at over their weekly visit. And there's 12 of them. We got assigned campsite number 12, which is the farthest and most remote campsite from the center of the camp. So once we got assigned to our campsites, we pretty much all split up. We headed out to our own designated places we were supposed to go and look. My manager, Steven, had brought about 4 or 5 of us out to campsite 12. And it took us probably about 20 minutes to hike out there. It's that far away from the cafeteria. I was trying my damn best to stay close to everybody because, like I said, I didn't bring anything. I wasn't prepared for this. I didn't have a flashlight. And I didn't want to get lost because if anybody knows, we're already out in the redwoods. These are giant, massive trees that just blot out anything. Just the night sky. And if anybody knows, being in a forest when it's nighttime, not being around any sort of civilization, actually camping, it gets extremely dark. It is darker than dark. It is one of the darkest experiences you will ever have. Sometimes you can barely, depending on where you are, how clear the sky is, how deep you are in a forest, you can't see anything without a flashlight. No, sometimes your eyes won't even adjust. It is dark, dark. So of course I didn't want to get lost. And we eventually make it to campsite 12. And we're calling out Hunter, we're calling out Tanner. We just got to do a patrol around the campsite for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we could head back to the cafeteria. And these two dudes aren't lost by any means. They're probably hanging out around a campfire in one of the campsites, and they're probably smoking a joint, and they're enjoying themselves. But they gotta pretend that they're lost. Anyway, we're there for about 5 or 10 minutes, and we're calling their names. We're just doing what we have to do. And somehow, I remember I'd went around. This, to me, this is what I'm confused on to this day. I've relived this night in my head over and over and over. It comes up in I tell this story as well as many stories from this summer to various friends and family members, anyone who just wants to listen. And this next part is just an absolute anomaly. I just can't explain rationally what had happened, and it confuses me to this day. I had went around this particular giant, thick redwood tree in the center of the camp, and I'm hearing everyone calling out Hunter and Tanner. And as soon as I went around this tree, it just got really quiet. And somehow I had got separated from my group. I didn't see their flashlights. I didn't hear them calling, both of those guys' names. Even though just like 5 seconds ago, they had all been screaming at the top of their lungs, including me. It was just me, all by myself, in this redwood forest at night. And I can't tell you how scared shitless I was. Like I said, I didn't have my flashlight. I couldn't see anything. And my first instinct was to call out for my group. Call out the names of the guys that I was with. And I was, like I said, I was scared shitless. And I was like screaming Bloody Mary, blood-curdlingly, all these guys named my group. And they weren't there. None of them were answering. And I was probably, I don't know, your mind plays tricks on you, and your perception of time changes when you're under a large amount of fear and stress. I can't tell you with absolute certainty how long I was alone by myself in that moment, because it honestly felt like hours of just being all by myself in a very dark part of the woods. And my eyes weren't adjusting to the darkness at all. I couldn't see anything, and no matter how long and how loudly I called for my group mates, none of them weren't answering. And I remember at this point I was hyperventilating. I was basically having a panic attack. And like I said, your mind plays tricks on you. And I remember, for a minute or two, it was quiet, other than just me just screaming for my group mates. And I don't know if there was something out there with me, or my mind was just so scared shitless that I was audio hallucinating. But I remember, and it's very odd, I don't know to this day, I remember hearing footsteps, leaves and twigs crunching all around me. And I remember just like, I basically started breaking down and crying because I was just so scared, and I thought I thought I was gonna die. I thought I was gonna die out in those woods. And these crunching, these footsteps, it seems like are getting closer and closer, and they're getting louder. And it seems like just before something is about to happen, all of a sudden, just literally out of thin air, one of my group mates pops out from behind the tree and says, Gabe, where the hell are you? Where's your mind at tonight? We've been calling you for the last 5 minutes, and we haven't gotten a response from you. We're getting very worried. And I'm just absolutely bamboozled. I'm caught off guard. I'd been screaming for these guys for it seemed like, hours. And all of a sudden, they're there out of nowhere. And I remember just getting my shit together, wiping the tears off of my eyes, and we all went back to the cafeteria. Both the Hunter and Tanner were found, and the night was pretty much over. We all went back to Staff Hill, and we slept for the remainder of the night. Like I said, I've carried this memory with me for more than a decade now, and tried thinking in every conceivable way, rationally, of what had occurred that night, and it just doesn't make any sense. And maybe there is a logical or, a rational explanation as to the events that occurred that night that I'm just overlooking or not thinking of. But until that happens, this just remains a very bizarre, creepy, unexplained event. And I told my group mates, they all became my friends at the end of the summer. I told my group mates my side of the story of what happened that night many times over the summer, and they're just as baffled and confused as I was. And I've told people this over, at bonfires over the years, camping events, and maybe it's just, therapeutic, cathartic for me to just get this off my chest. It at the very least, very entertaining. Because I like horror stories. I've heard horror stories growing up at campfires, and maybe it's just a way to relive those, nostalgic events, and for me to scare the hell out of some people if I can, give them a little adrenaline rush. But this event, nonetheless, will perplex me for the rest of my life until the day that I die. And so I wanted to share this with you guys in my community as just a way of giving thanks for all the support. And that summer in particular was just very bizarre, and there's a lot of weird, unexplainable things that have happened that I plan on telling on this channel in the future. Maybe that'll be for the 500 sub special. But I'm really looking forward to telling you guys more content like this. And so, if you like what you heard, go ahead and give a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe if it so behooves you. And have a good night, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for all your support. This Thursday I'll have a new collab coming out with a new friend of the channel, so stay tuned. It's going to be a lot of fun. Take care, everybody.